Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's podcast. I am coming to you from Brooklyn. I'm H.A. Conrad, as always, with my intrepid West Coast co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Hi, HA. How are you?
I am doing really well. How are you?
Clearly, you are doing really well. I am also doing really well.
We have a few little news tidbits, and then we're going to be doing a review of Operation Undead, which was a Thai zombie film that came out in 2024. But let's hop into the news items. There's a little bit more about 28 years later. And apparently,
28 years later, the Bone Temple,
right,
the second of the 28 years laters.
right. Sorry, I
Yeah.
guess I need to specify.
Yeah, well, they'll all have the first pre-title. Is that a thing?
Yeah. Um, but in this case, apparently, Nia DaCosta, who is like
The
is
director.
the director, sorry. I'm clearly need a little more caffeine today. Whew. Yes, Nia DaCosta is the director and wanted to add in more infected to it because I think um and this is something we talked about a little bit with the first film. I think there was some feedback that there wasn't enough infected, and so um I think that's um this was something that I think they said at the Edinburgh Film Festival or something like that, right? Uh,
Somewhere like that. I found it interesting because this is like it's Alex Garland and Danny Boyle, the power to some duo doing this movie, and then they hand it off to other subsequent directors, and so these directors are inheriting. It's like being on a Marvel production, which Nia DaCosta is familiar with because she did
mhm.
the Marvels, I think, or Miss Marvel, or one, I don't know. She's done Marvel stuff before, so she gets handed a world, and she has to like imprint it with her stamp of directorial authorship. And so she was like, well, I got to help develop some of these characters. She mentioned Samson, the alpha, which I thought was interesting. Apparently going to be a return character in the second movie. And she's like, and the other thing that I asked for was more infected. That just makes me like her better because I don't think you can ever go wrong with too many zombies in a zombie show or movie. If anything, the opposite is more true. Like if you don't have enough, you definitely have problems with it. If you have a lot to too many, I don't think anybody's complaining usually, unless there's like no plot because it's just zombies and
Well,
eating.
no, I mean, what she was saying was that she actually thought the script was really good, and that's heartening to hear. And that was she's like, yeah, and that was my big contribution as adding in
Yeah.
more zombies, which, I can't fault her for that. And I am excited
Overall, this
to
is an
hear.
encouraging update, right? Like
Yeah.
it's all good news.
And I'm excited to hear that she thought it was a really great script. Not that she would say otherwise, but she's pretty well seasoned, so I don't think she would say that just offhand. So I like hearing that news. So that's
Yeah.
looking forward to seeing that. And I am excited that Samson is going to make a return. So that'll be pretty cool. In other news, the long-awaited Marvel Zombies is going to be
Slightly less awaited. I mean, it's
yes.
moved up. The release date's now September 24. I also read some stuff this week that it was originally supposed to be a movie, but I feel like they came out pretty early on saying this was going to be a show. So if it was ever going to be a movie, it must have been for like 5 minutes,
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that they didn't kind of wait for the Halloween
right?
but this is also kind of everybody's back to school, so it's actually maybe a key date.
And
So
it's like the Christmas season. It's always a little bit earlier every year. So
right,
Halloween.
maybe. So I'm excited now to see that earlier. So yeah. And then you found a little bit of something about Last of Us, and
Yeah, I'm always on the lookout. Since Neil Druckmann stepped away and Craig Mazin is the main showrunner, he did a Hollywood Reporter interview last week talking about how he is writing Last of Us season 3 right now, that he's enjoying this phase because it's just him and his keyboard and just click clacking and making words. And then it's in a next few weeks to months, it's going to start getting a lot busier. And then he's going to continue to write it as he's directing some episodes, finishing the show several weeks while they're shooting it. So apparently he says that that's not a standard way to do things, that you're still writing the later episodes as you're producing the first few, but that's his method.
Yeah, and I think that he talked a lot about some of the things that he learned while making Chernobyl, and I do think he seems to be pretty nimble in terms of how his ideas about where a season is going are pretty clear to him at least, but he doesn't have an issue with adapting to those things. And so I am curious to see what he does without Druckmann kind of like there to help collaborate. So I think and I also think it's a little bit hard to do the things that he does, which is like he's still writing when they're shooting. And so maybe that allows a little bit more flexibility, as long as you don't lose your way. But
Yeah,
uh,
and he's trying to direct episodes too, so I feel like that's putting a lot on your plate
yeah.
for
Um,
sure.
I did notice that it's not like I wouldn't say he threw a little bit of shade, but he did kind of say that, Neil had always been kind of running Naughty Dog full time and that it was him up in Canada kind of doing all the production things. And he's like, so things are pretty much as the same as usual. So
Yeah, I don't feel like that's shade throwing so much as saying it's not going to be any different. Like Neil wasn't there on set, so it's not going to be like we've got a man down.
yeah.
That's the way I interpreted it anyway. There was also an interesting part of this interview where he talks about how all the guest stars on Last of Us basically get nominated for an Emmy or
Yeah,
win.
it's true.
Because yeah, even Joey Pants apparently got an Emmy nomination for his run
Hmm.
as I forget the name of his character now, but uh, as the psychiatrist's husband.
Wow, that was pretty good.
I mean, yeah, they're all great, but it's just like so he was talking about how slightly fewer people were coming to clamoring at the door to get a role in season three potentially, but that they still have a really good track record of writing good stuff for these and being able to get the good talent for their guest stars.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing, this is a great interview that he did. And then the other thing that I thought that was not shocking or whatever, but one of the things he said he had learned while shooting Chernobyl was just how important that the attention to detail matters. Just being, telling the story and the impact. And in that case, it was about people, some people were still alive. But I think he's always said that he understands how important some of this is to the fans. And while he'll change certain things, there's like certain like kernels and tenets that he doesn't want to mess with. Or if he does adapt them, he wants to be true, and honor like at least the sort of like underlying like principle of it or the idea of it. Though I think it's a little slightly different, obviously. But I just thought that was like an interesting comment. And then he also talked a lot about visual effects and how important those are, and things that you don't think matter end up being really important just in terms of the storytelling. So I thought this was kind of an interesting interview, and so I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
And last up is just kind of a funny thing. Uh,
I feel like we haven't seen a news like a police blotter article like this in a while, but this is out of Lake Oswego and outside of Portland, Oregon, and where the police were called to the scene of a of loud screaming. But then the police blotter goes on to tell you it was just somebody watching The Walking Dead with the volume up way too high, which is funny stuff.
yeah.
But also loud enough that it concerned the neighbors. Maybe they thought it was real screaming. Maybe they were just trying to get their neighbors to turn their TV down. But
Every once in a while, depending on what we're watching, because we have a projector and we do give the neighbors a heads up that we're watching things, because sometimes, depending on what it is, it can be, especially if we're watching something like horror related. Um, if you're out in the hallway, it sounds concerning. So we try to give people a heads up on that. Probably more my content than Bill's, of course, but.
hmm
But in any case, I just thought this was funny, and I was like, yeah, there's a reason you give people a heads up about it. So, but in Oswego, probably neighbors are too far away to do that. So, um, but I think that brings us to what we were talking about today.
Yeah, the main
So,
event.
Operation Undead came out in 2024, filmed in Thailand, and it's set in 1941, during World War II.
Well, let's talk about the fact that it's a writer director.
Right.
solo person, Kongkyat Kamsari. I'm saying all those words wrongly, but so it's you know, it's from one person's perspective is writing his direction or there. I don't really know if it's a guy.
Hmm.
Um, and it's got a quite a large cast. Let's talk about production first, HA. How did you feel about where it was set, the costumes, the makeup and all that stuff?
I mean, I thought some of the effects were really excellent. The setting was beautiful and it's like a very different setting than, I think when we say World War II, people automatically assume Europe and they think about all the like things that happened with D-Day and
And if you think about World War II and you think Pacific theater, you're not thinking about Thailand because it
right.
was never a major battlefield that, well, at least as Americans, that we're aware of.
Right. So, or it's not mainstream. It's not something that we're learning about enough of anyway.
And
So I kind
frankly,
of
that
like,
was one of the more interesting parts about this story,
yeah.
where they talk about the relationship between the Siam government and the Japanese forces who showed up there, and it seems a lot more complicated and nuanced than I had ever realized. So that
Right.
was kind of interesting.
So I kind of like that. I didn't find, did you find how much the spend was on this? I did not. But I really thought that it was, the costumes and the storytelling was really interesting. The one thing I will say, because it runs about like almost 2 hours, I do think it could have been cut down to like an hour and 20. I don't know that you needed quite like it kind of felt like a lot of it was repeating the storyline, and I think you could have gotten there without so many scenes, which I will addressing certain things. But I did really like the effects. I liked, kind of the idea of the storyline, and they did a different thing with this the sort of like the zombie canon here. So yeah, so let's get into it. Essentially, the group of people that we're following are what they call junior soldiers. And so I'm assuming they don't have rank. That's what it seemed to be,
I think
right?
that is their rank, yeah. But they're mostly recognizable by the fact that they wear shorts
Right.
and little peaked hats. Um, Instead of, like the other, most of them are these junior soldiers, and then our hero, quote unquote, is this guy Mech, who is a corporal, and he gets to wear long pants and a helmet, and whereas the junior soldiers are all wearing shorts and these little hats. So that seems to set them apart, and the fact that when they're actually in battle, they're just running around screaming, and people just refer to them as kids, like because maybe they're like ROTC.
Well, they're like teenagers. That's what I kind of gathered.
Yeah,
Though, one of them is like a dad, I guess.
yeah, yeah. That makes it a little confusing, huh?
But anyway, they're kind of running around and they're doing, the wild and crazy things that kids do, like uh like visiting the red light district and whatever.
And then playing a rousing game of soccer on the beach with the guy who was really mad at them, and they're all best friends, right? Like the first 15 minutes of this film does a decent job of endearing these people to you, as well as Mech, who's not with them, who's very rarely ever with them, but is also in the military. But so they're having this game of soccer after they've all been busted for going to the brothel. But the guy who's like chewing them out, their sergeant, is part of their soccer game, basically. After he's made them do push-ups in the surf, they're all just playing soccer and having like a beach scene together. It's quite endearing.
So Matt
And then Mac we meet
does not
also is he's like
play these
proposing to
childish
his
games.
girlfriend who tells him that she's having his baby, and then
He is much more mature. So he's ready to settle down and and in the midst of this happiness, suddenly a fisherman tells him that there are like iron boats coming and he ends up going to report this, and everybody gets kind of called in to help defend their beaches.
And then there's a very important scene. Uh, yeah, they're told to defend the beaches, but we also have a scene of the Thai officials, like some generals saying, we're going to pretend to resist, but then we're fine with Japan taking over." So that's one of those interesting sort of like inside looks of the perspective of this film, where
Right,
the
but part of
Japanese
it.
forces are always kind of cast as semi-evil, almost entirely evil, I would say.
Yeah, and in this case, it's not only that they were like, "Oh, we'll let you take over," it's that we don't really want your brand of biological warfare here, because they show them examples. They're like, "Yeah, we don't really want that. You can just, we'll just give up. It's okay."
Yeah,
And it is pretty, but they basically say, "Oh, we have to make it look good," and so you already know that these young people are going to go into basically what is theater and pretty sad. And, since they do have biological tests and weapons here, what could go wrong? So, in any case, Mock, who is the younger brother of Mech and part of this group of junior soldiers, is basically like, I'm not having any of this. And is gonna like basically go home, grab his stuff and abandon everything. Um, and this is a pretty big turning point because his brother, Mech, is like, yeah, you can't, you shouldn't do that. And um, you should, be supportive of our nation and all sorts of stuff. And so really gives him a guilt trip. And
big time guilt trip. I think the mech character is actually pretty interesting for this film, partially because he's cast at first as this hero.
right.
But then Mach is definitely the hero by the end of the film, and Mech is more of a fallen hero,
Yeah.
where like his motivations turn out to be not well placed, or his actions don't meet his rhetoric. So I thought that that was actually kind of interesting.
Yeah. And you know, I don't think it will surprise this audience, but even though it was promised that the biological weapon wouldn't be used, they, of course, kind of smuggle it onto the beach, and it's actually some infected Japanese soldier. And I thought that the effects here in the camera shot, it's like a lot of fast cuts and editing, and it's pretty brutal. And it isn't linear necessarily because there's a lot of almost like flash forwards, and you're not always certain what is real and what is not. But I thought that this was a pretty effective way of showing how terrifying it was to be on the beach. And then this group of junior soldiers, Mock essentially like leads them away. Um, and they're being chased by this zombie, essentially, this infected. And basically they all like the speed at which this this creature or this infected is running is terrifying. And
Yeah,
you
it's
almost
never
want
really duplicated. Like that, those abilities that we don't see because it's all happening somehow off camera
right.
here, those never happen again. So it's a bit odd that they
It is
introduced
weird,
it that
but
way.
in this case, it's terrifying. And like basically, he's picking them off one by one, but we kind of speed forward so you don't see it all on camera, which is honestly a little bit more interesting because you don't know exactly what's happening.
Sure.
And then,
That's good horror camera work, you know, don't show the monster. But well, because actually too, when they do, it's they're much more mundane than this guy is in this series of scenes. I do want to also call out that cool POV shot of the crate coming ashore.
that was fun.
That was yeah, that was cool. Like, and that was kind of helping you. That was your perspective of watching the action unfold on the beach before you join the group of junior soldiers running and screaming.
Yeah, because it's the perspective of the infected. And, you know, all he wants is just a little snack. He wants to get out. He wants to just be free. And
And then he all he wants is to see his wife in a stream in Thailand. Eventually, when we get to know him a little bit, because his name is Private Nobu.
Mhm.
I
And
didn't think we would get to know this guy at all, but we get to know all the zombies because that's one of the weird things about this film.
no, it's an interesting twist on this, like
Yeah,
that they actually have some memory or they know a little bit what they're doing, but they're kind of powerless to fight against it.
yeah. What comes after this scene is a lot of the first hour, I would say, of the film is kind of a lot of the zombies killing indiscriminately, but then having guilt trips about it. In the case of Mock, Mech being drafted into this Japanese hunter-killer squad led by the very terrifying Captain Nakamura, who looks like a zombie himself most of the time. And then so you're split into these two narratives of Mech, the captain of his Thai military squad, and the sergeant who had been playing soccer with the junior soldiers, and they've all been kind of joined with the destroyer squadron, I want to call them, and then Nakamura and his son, and then some other Japanese soldiers. And then meanwhile, in this cave, the zombies have been kind of taken under the wing of Nobu, who kind of shows them how to not. What do they do? They like they turn on fire. They immolate
Yeah, it's like a weird uh mechanism, but they have figured out ways around it, which is interesting. So they just douse themselves in mud.
because we
Uh,
do get these shots and bits of voiceover from this Japanese scientist who's also like the envoy to to the Thai government, where he's like, "Yeah, this is this is the biological weapon we don't want to unleash on your land,"
but we did.
but he does anyway. And then he's often looking at his notes and watching his own home movies about the process of creating this biological weapon and how this is his kill switch that they will self-immolate.
This is slightly lazy because they use him for this exposition and they keep going back to him again and again. And this is one of those things that I find to be a little onerous in storytelling. I think you could have streamlined this a bit.
Yeah,
And I also felt that way with some of the stories with the infected. I mean, I really loved the unfolding of the fact that how they got infected, like where Mock is being pulled out of the quicksand, and it's this moment where you think he's about to be rescued, but it's in fact infected. It's and then his whole troop is around, like his whole like group is around him. That's a pretty cool little scene. And I do like sort of the unveiling of the fact that they're this sort of group in the woods and they're doing these atrocious things, and how other people, like the destroyers, or I guess it's not them yet, it's like another group that comes to find them. They go and look for them and they find like weird little horrible things like rib cages and stuff being strung up. Um, and then the appearance of the junior soldiers is pretty cool. So I like that stuff. But
yeah.
it felt, and I did like the reveal when Mech makes the discovery as well. But I thought that a lot of it felt repetitive and a little bit lazy because
Well, it's all in the same set
yeah,
also. Yeah,
yeah,
so you have that set get used three times.
yeah,
And by the third time, when it's mech looking around, you're like, oh, okay, we've been here before. But also, it's all happening out of order. There was a really cool visual effect that they do where the leader of this Japanese patrol sits down on a hilltop, a little hillock, and then you cut away from him to look at his soldiers. His soldiers turn back to look at him, and you see him, and his face looks bloody, but then you realize that's not his face. That's the bottom half of his face. The top half of his face is this zombie who like stands up, and you're like, oh my God, they ate the whole top of his head
yeah.
in
And they
that cut.
are and they are really fast. So like that's the other thing. We see them kind of like able to appear and disappear pretty quickly. And that was they do play this little act with them. And so I thought that was kind of in really fun choreography. I do think that this must have been a really challenging thing to film, and there's like a ton of trees, and I would imagine the weather was probably not super cooperative. I have no idea how hot it was there, but it looks incredibly hot there when they were filmed. Like everybody's like sweating. I don't know how you keep all the makeup on in this instance, but it did look good and it looked creepy, and even the infected makeup. There's sort of like these little, like it's almost like pinpricks of all these like
Like
maybe
freckles.
it was freckles, but like I thought it may have been other things. So it was, and it just looked their hair and everything looked so bizarre and creepy, and like they're kind of falling apart. So I thought that they spent I would say a good amount of their budget on the makeup, and it showed.
Yeah, the
So
makeup is really good. I think that the actors all really put in a lot of effort here. Nobody's hanging back. All these junior soldiers are definitely giving it their all. Um, the story I think is where this movie is a little bit. Yeah, I agree. At the hour mark, I looked at my notes and I was like, yeah, I'm
hey,
ready for this movie to be
I was
over.
like, I think this needed to be edited a little. So, and the back and forth just about how evil the Japanese are and their plans, because it's like, okay, this was an experiment and we don't want to kill them. We want to experiment on them and see what level we can take this weapon to. And it's like, you could set all of this stuff up in the outset. You don't need to go back to it 5 times. And it's almost like they have to prove how evil they're being. And it's like, I don't know that you need to do that to hit that, to drive that point home. And that one, the main destroyer leader goes out so many times and becomes more and more nefarious as he does, which is like, let's bring their, I mean, we get the plot point where it's like, let's bring their loved ones and do horrible things to them. Why? I don't know. It just is like to attract them, maybe, but
Ostensibly to like tie up any loose ends also is part of it.
but it was just very a little to me a little over the top and repetitive. Like they
Yeah.
do it once with the dad of the one of the zombies, and he's like, rightly so, like, what have you done to my son? And they're just kind of torturing him, and then they do this pretty much with every single loved one of anybody of the junior soldiers, which is really just pretty bad. And then they take it way over the top. So like Sek, who is the one we had mentioned that had a child, there's this whole horrible scene where they are essentially torturing his wife and child in front of him, or they just kill them outright. And
Well,
it's
they kill him. They kill them by accident. They were aiming for him.
I
He
don't
ducks, and the harpoon goes through his wife and daughter, which
so
is
I don't know that that's
horrific.
what they were doing.
I
I
mean,
do
if you look back, and he is ducked under the rope,
okay.
so it's. I think it was not on purpose because obviously they want the harpoon to go through the zombie.
But then they kind of take that lesson and they do what
Oh
they're
yeah, they for sure just do it to everybody. It's messed up. But that's in the third act. I think the sack and wife and daughter thing happens kind of in the second act, although it all feels the same. Their RPG harpoon thing is super badass. I love that. I wish they had more of them in this film.
yeah. That was pretty good.
But by the time, like, once Mech actually ends up getting killed too, right during that same scene with Sack and his wife and daughter, because basically everybody who we care about who's left alive, male characters anyway, are all killed here. It's Mech, it's the captain and the sergeant from the Thai soldier squad. All get killed in this scene. A few Japanese soldiers too. Nakamura strangely disappears in the middle of this battle, and he has a habit of doing that. He makes sure that he's around for the final scene of the movie. Um, and then at this point, I'm like looking at my notes. I'm like, well, okay, I guess I kind of care about Mech and Mock's mom and Penn, the pregnant fiance. But those
Yeah.
are the only characters left who aren't bad guys who I know, and that feels a bit odd because they haven't been developed at all. I mean, Penn has a little bit, but it felt like a really weird turn. But then I was not taking into account the fact that these zombies are still characters and still have dialogue and opinions, and so that was where I think the movie threw me for a loop too.
Yeah, and that was the one aspect that I did like, which is that they're infected, they are aware of the horrible things that they've been doing, but they're powerless to stop them. But they keep, maybe not in the moment, maybe they're overtaken by what their instincts are forcing them to do, but they're feeling an incredible amount of like guilt and horror at these actions, and they talk about it.
I
And
feel like it's really just Mock who feels that way. Because Mech, what's funny here is Mech gets turned into a zombie. He had just 5 minutes, not even 5 minutes, 30 seconds before he's killed, he had shot his brother and made him fall off a cliff, even though his brother was trying to run away from him.
yeah,
His zombie brother, I should put. So then Mech gets turned into a zombie. They're reunited very shortly after that, and neither of them ever talk about that scene, which I thought was really weird because Mech basically turns into a zombie and also becomes homicidal. His eyes go all black. He later purposefully bites Penn in a way like to try and keep her quote unquote alive because she's been shot, she's bleeding out, and he wants Mock to bite the mother, but it's too late and she's unsavable. Again, in quotes, because I don't think none of these zombies can be cured in this world. And Mock calls him to reads him the riot act for doing this because he's like, you shouldn't have done this. They would have been better off dead than to live like this. So I feel like certainly between the two of them, it's Mock who is the moral compass, even though Mech was the one giving him all that hard time about nationalism and being
yeah.
brave earlier on in the film. And again, that's part of that narrative that I
It flips,
kind of
it,
enjoy.
and part of why it flips for Mech is because He now it feels incredibly guilty because he had told his brother to serve the nation, and he thinks his brother's dead, and he finds out even worse what happens to him. And but also he sees that like his government is dealing with the Japanese and that they are condoning some of the things that they're doing. And I will say the leadership at the end does stand up, but it's far too little too late. And that is sort of a theme here. And then Mock, who's the one who tried to run away, basically is like, no, I've got to like save everybody. And by saving them, I mean destroying them because he doesn't want this to get out. He doesn't want this to infect more people. And he's the one who says to Mech, like, I can't believe you did this to Penn because it would have been better for her to die. And it is pretty awful, like seeing her walk around. For some reason,
That was a funny scene. I'm sorry.
when you turn this way, for some reason, it like flips to her, and it's like she's just kind of, like her skin's all slimy. It's just like really depressing.
And she's just wandering around mindless while Mech and Mock are having this discussion, like this heartfelt, somber, erudite discussion as two zombies sitting on a boulder. Behind them, all of their friends and family are wandering around all zombie-like. And you're like, okay, why are you two special? Apparently they have something that makes them slightly more in, together versions of these zombies. I thought that was funny. I will say the scene where so Nobu had this moment, the original zombie, he had this moment in a stream where he sees his ex-wife or his wife or whatever that woman is to him, and he's like, "Oh, I'm so sad," and then he turns into dust and disappears, and a flower blooms, right? And we're like, "Oh, okay, cool." And the scientists voiceover also confirms that when they turn into dust, there's a regenerative effect on nature. We're like, cool, bonus effect of zombie life cycle. And then there's a scene where it's after Penn has sacrificed herself to save some other zombie from Mech's mindless
Imagination.
rage. Yeah. And he feels bad about that for about a half a second. But so Penn is gone, so is mom. Their dad had died before the war, before the film. And suddenly Mock sees them all and starts to go into dust like Nobu had, but then thinks about what his brother said, you always run away, you're never going to fight for what you believe in. And he pulls himself back together, literally pulls himself back together.
Literally, he starts
And
to go to dust, and the dust
yeah,
comes back. It's great.
it comes. I thought that was really cool. Like I didn't see that coming. I kind of was like, "Oh, good for you, Mock. Just get out of this whole situation. It's a total disaster here." But he is the hero we need, and pulls himself back together and goes to confront his brother before, because his brother's new plan is let's turn everybody on this island into
Zombie.
zombies. And Mock is like, that doesn't sound like a good plan.
Yep.
And Mock actually, that's when he kills that guy. He's like, "Oh, you don't agree with me? I will cut your head off." But he cuts off Penn's head, and then the other guy too, because he really doesn't feel that bad about cutting off his fiance's head.
Yep.
Like Nakamura also is like going against his own people here because he and the scientists were always at loggerheads. The scientists wanted to study the zombies for good, question mark. But Nakamura is like, no, let's kill them all. He has lost his son to this virus and cut him down. And I think in that act, he has become even more heartless. And eventually, he finds the scientist's diary where the words "they're weak to fire" is all
Yeah.
he like. The fact that, yeah, that I think all the scientist stuff could have been cut out because we see Mech burn a zombie very effectively in the first act. That's really all you need, right? You don't need the scientist there to explain stuff.
Yep.
So, I mean, you could just have some real like throw there's some dialogue that's like, yeah, we developed this in a lab. They told, higher ups told us to bring him aboard, bring him to
Right.
the shore and practice here. And then we can figure it all out from there. We don't need scientists with his home movies
No.
to help us figure it out. So I do think that that's where they could have cut this short. And finally, we have the big confrontation in the caves, which goes really badly for Nakamura. I gotta say, I was expecting more from him.
I was too, and it was a little bit disappointing in how like non-interesting it was. But
Non-interested. I mean, I just thought he was like, oh, let's bring our flamethrowers, but then they don't actually use the flamethrower
and
until all of his guys are already dead, basically.
yeah, and then they're wandering around the dark. I don't know, with some bioluminescence happening, but it was just a little bit boring to me because it's sort of like we're running from darkness to darkness in the cave. We'll have a little bit of this bioluminescence, and I thought that that was gonna do something more interesting. The only thing that I was thinking is again, how difficult it must have been to film this and to film it well because
Yeah.
it's really rough, going in tiny spaces, and
Yeah.
I
Do you
would
think
say
that was a real cave or a set? There were definitely
I think
elements of it
probably,
that were
but
manufactured.
some of it seemed like, but even if it was, it's just like still pretty close quarters. And I will say, it felt like it could have, it got boring because it's like his motivation is ultimately like his son gets turned, and so he's of course going to be all angry, but it just felt like it could have been a little bit more interesting in terms of like what their confrontation would be. But to me, it wasn't. The most interesting thing is honestly what Mock does at the end, which is, okay, I'm gonna do this because I love all of you and I love I don't want this to go any further. And he does the really hard thing, which is weirdly what his brother had tried to do with him, even though he hated doing it. And so he takes them all out with a flamethrower, and then they in turn flame up the destroyer unit or whatever they are.
Yeah. And they make sure the filmmakers make sure we see that Mech comes back from his black-eyed madness right before he gets lit on fire by his brother
They just
because
have
of
a permanent.
how torn up Mach is about doing this. Mech like regains sanity, and then when he's lit on fire and his friends, like you said, they they don't just writhe and burn, they turn around and throw themselves on the Japanese zombies.
So
Thus,
hopefully they'll on. And then Mock, of course, at the end does.
he does it too. He's like, "Oh, dog pile," and then all the zombies are gone. We think. I mean, maybe there's still one out there.
But I really loved the makeup. I loved the idea of this. I wish it had been a little bit more consistent in the storytelling in terms of like their powers. I agree with you. Like some of what Nobu initially was doing was sort of like really cool, and we didn't get to see a lot more of that. Maybe it's because he was the prototype. But they also did say that the virus is evolving, so maybe they had slightly different superpowers. But I did like the setting. I thought that this was just an interesting idea and a storyline that we don't normally see, and in this particular time period. So I really liked that. But I did think that it could have. I think you could have really streamlined it and gotten a lot of the point across without making it 2 hours long. So that was my takeaway. But it looked really good. The effects were good. I did like the acting. I thought like some of the actors were really phenomenal. So, um,
Yeah.
you know, I think it would be, I would watch something else from this director. I thought he was fun.
Yeah, I feel like there was so much potential here. Like even the relationship between Nakamura and his son was interesting. The way his son was a great actor.
Yeah.
And Nakamura was, I think, was a really strong actor. But what they had as dialogue showed you only like the very tip of the iceberg of what they could have. And like even in their final scenes together, the son is like, "Dad, I need to talk to you." And then his dad's like, "No, we've got this ambush we're doing right now." And then his son dies. We don't even know what his son was going to say to him. Like, like so much lost potential, even just the way they wrote it. They wrote all that, yeah, they wrote it like to be anticlimactic in a sad way. So that was a
I think
bummer.
I think you also are supposed to feel how they're disconnected. They were so disconnected. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that came across in the performance, and I like that. But I feel like they could have done more between those two. Mech and Mock had so much to figure out, and Mock dies so early on in the film, quote unquote, because he becomes a zombie. At first I was like, wait, that feels like an odd choice because he seemed like an interesting character, not realizing, of course, that these zombies had a lot to say. So that was interesting. It was different. You got to give it that. This genre of ours, it's a giver.
yes, it is. So anyway, I did enjoy this. I really would certainly give another. I would look to see what else this director is doing. So definitely fun. Um, and I don't know. Did you have anything else to add?
That's about it. I think we should stay in Thailand though and do another Thai movie next time. How do you feel about
Do you want to?
Siam or Ziam? I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I've seen some favorable headlines.
Okay, sure. Let's do it.
And if you anybody has seen Operation Undead has feelings, thoughts, please let us know what those are. You can email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. And you can find the rest of our episodes online at Podbean, which is at reanimated.podbean.com.
And thank you so much for listening. We'd love to hear what you think. And until next time, bye bye.
See ya.